You know, for a long time, I couldn't figure out a way to make the cuffs of the sleeves stretchy enough so that they're comfortable. The only cast on I knew back then was the long tail cast on, and of course, it doesn't give you a stretchy edge, right? But then I learned of a way that I'm going to share with you in this tutorial. I know it as an Italian cast on, but in many sources it's also called long tail tubular cast on. No matter how you call it, it's a great way to cast on stitches for anything worked in 1x1 ribbing. Let's see how it works. This type of cast on requires a long tail. It should be at least 4 times as long as the width of the cast on. So I'm going to cast on 8 stitches, and this tail should be long enough. Now place the tail on your left thumb and the working yarn on your left index finger, and then hold both strands with the other 3 fingers, just like you do when you do the long tail cast on. Now take one of the needles and place it on top of the strand that is between your thumb and the index finger. Then move the needle around the yarn, creating a loop with a twist at the bottom. See, this is our first stitch, and the twist should happen in such a way that the strand that comes from the thumb is on top of the strand that comes from the index finger. Now we're going to create stitches in a ribbing pattern, and we'll start with the purl stitch. To create a purl stitch, insert the needle under the strand that comes from the index finger, then pick the strand that comes from the thumb and move it from under the strand that comes from the index finger, just like this. And as you see, here's a bar at the bottom. That means we've just created a purl stitch. To create a knit stitch, insert the needle under the strand that comes from the thumb, then pick the strand that comes from the index finger and get it from under the strand that comes from the thumb. And that's our knit stitch. And keep doing that until you get as many stitches as you need for the project. So alternate, go once, start going from the strand that comes from the index finger, and the next stitch would start from the strand that comes from the thumb. And keep going until you get the number of stitches that you need. So I'm going to cast on 8 stitches, and I think I already have that. Right. So when you cast on all the stitches that you need, twist the tail and the working yarn before you turn your work, because this last stitch could easily unravel. It's just a wrap, basically, right? So twist the strands and then turn your work. And that's how the cast on works, but it's only part of the deal, because then there is an issue with how to work the first row, and there are 2 ways to work the first row. The first way is the easiest. You simply start working in the ribbing pattern, but you knit stitches through the back loop. So you would insert, and see, you can see this stitch looks like a knit and this one looks like a purl. So it's basically not really hard to see which stitch is which. Insert the needle into the stitch, but you go from right to left because we are working through the back loop, and then knit the stitch and slip it off. Bring the yarn to the front. This stitch is a purl, so we purl it, and the next stitch is a knit. We knit it through the back loop, and then purl and knit again, and keep going until you come to the last stitch, and that's gonna be a purl. Here we go. That's how this edge looks, and that's how it looks on a swatch. So it's the same yarn, same everything. I just didn't want to take your time waiting for me to make a few rows so you could see the edge, and that's why I made the swatch. So that's how it looks. And see, the best thing about this type of cast on is that it kind of goes continuously around the fabric, and of course it has a great stretch. It stretches pretty nicely, and it looks as if it comes from nowhere. It doesn't have that solid ridge that normally you would get when you cast on stitches using long tail cast on. So that's how how the fabric looks if you use the first way to work the first rows. And now let's take a look at how I will unravel all this, and let's take a look at how to work the first rows using the second way. So I'm gonna cast on 8 more stitches, and while I'm doing that, I'm gonna show you one more little tip. If you stop casting on at the middle of the cast on, basically, or if you get distracted at some point you don't remember which way to go, whether to go here or there, right? Here's how to find your place. Look at this twist. How to show it better. Look at this twist, see, where the yarns are twisted, and always start the next stitch from the yarn that is underneath. See, now the yarn that comes from the thumb is underneath. It's at the back of the yarn that comes from the index finger. So if I'm not sure which side to go, just look at the twist, and in this case I know I'm gonna start from here and then make the next stitch. And now see, it changed, and now the twist is made in such a way that the yarn that comes from the index finger is at the back. So if I would be hesitant as to where to go, I would know that I should go this way. So that's a little tip, because sometimes in the middle of the cast on you get distracted or you stop for some reason, and then it's just like, okay, where should I go, right? So I have 8 stitches, and I twist the yarns again and turn the work. And now I'm going to show you the second way of setting up the pattern and working the first rows. This way requires 2 rows. The first row would be knit a stitch through the back loop, and you knit the knit stitch, the one that looks like knit, and then bring the yarn to the front and slip the purl with the yarn at the front of the work. Then knit a stitch, slip a purl, knit another stitch, slip, then knit the last knit, and I split the yarn somewhere, and then purl the last purl, because we cannot slip it with the yarn in front, because we would just lose the wrap, right? So that was the first row of the second way to work to set up the pattern. The second row will be very similar, but we knit the stitches the usual way through the front loop. So knit the stitch, then bring the yarn to the front, slip the purl, knit, bring the yarn to the front, slip, knit, slip, knit the last one, and again purl the last stitch. Don't slip it, just purl it. And that's it. In some cases you might want to go even to make 4 rows like that, not 2 rows. And I'll show you what the difference is. Here's another swatch. So this is the one that I showed you already. That's the one that uses the first way. And that's how stretchy it is, and that's how it looks when you look at the edge like this. And this is the swatch that I made using the second way. So it has less stretch. See, it's not as stretchy as this one because of those slipped stitches and the yarn. So those yarn bars, they're basically holding it in place. And it is thicker. So see, this one is thinner, and this one is thicker. You can clearly see the difference. If you work even more rows, if you work 4 rows instead of 2, then it will be even thicker and it will have even less stretch, which is okay in some cases. As you see, both ways of working the first rows have their pros and cons, but the truth is the result is not that much different. If you noticed, I even marked one of the swatches with a safety pin, so I could remember which swatch was knit using the first way and which swatch was knit using the second way. So if you're not too fussy about the amount of stretch and the thickness of the cast on edge, then pick the way that works better for you and use it anytime you need to cast on stitches for 1x1 ribbing. To download this tutorial and a set of step-by-step photo instructions, follow the link in the description. Thank you for watching this video and have a wonderful week. I'll see you next Thursday.